Hi everyone, how's it going? I'm Eric from Lonesome Reader, and this is the first part of my March reading wrap-up. So I had a mini panic this morning because I went to go make some tea and I thought I was out of tea, which is a really big thing for me. Like the first thing I need to do is get a cup of tea in the morning. But thankfully I went rooting around in my cupboard and I found this packet of Earl Grey tea, so phew, big relief. I drink like 4 big mugs of tea a day. I'm so addicted to caffeine, it's a bit of a problem. So I've had a really busy month so far. One of the things I love most about living in London is that basically every major author, when they have a new book out, will do a reading here. So I try to go to a lot of readings, and I've seen quite a few authors already this month. So far I've seen the amazing George Saunders, whose novel I talked about in my last reading wrap-up video. I just loved this book so much, and it was so fascinating hearing him talk. Because he writes in such an experimental, strange style, he has a really fascinating perspective on the writing process. And because his novel is written like a play, he didn't just do a traditional reading. He had a group of people get up and sort of perform sections of the novel. It was more like the read-through of a play, and it brought the novel alive in a really interesting way. I'd really like to listen to the audiobook of Lincoln in the Bardo now. I keep hearing such good things about that. And I love that when he signed his book to me, he drew a peace sign hanging on his signature by one arm. I've also seen Arundhati Roy talk about her first novel that she's published in 20 years since her amazingly successful The God of Small Things, which won the Booker Prize. And I got this beautiful embossed proof of her new novel. It sounds so good, and I'm really excited to read it. And you know it's a serious publishing event when there's this warning on the front saying strictly embargoed. I've also seen Paul Auster discussing his humongous new book, 4321. Anyone who knows his fiction knows that he writes a lot about the way chance impacts upon our lives. Well, he doesn't like the word chance anymore. Now he's using the word unexpected, which he thinks better captures the actual experience of life and the way that things just sort of happen to us in an unexpected way one day after another. His new novel sounds really fascinating, but honestly I don't know when I'm gonna find time to read it because it's quite big. If any of you have read it yet, I'd really like to know your thoughts. And I've also seen the authors Ayobami Adebayo and Chibundu Onuzo being interviewed by the fantastic book blogger Naomi. Coincidentally, this was on the night that the Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction longlist was announced, and it turned out that Ayobami was on the list. It's a really interesting longlist, which I'm sure I'm going to talk about in another video. Her novel, Stay With Me, is the first book that I read this month. So this novel follows a Nigerian couple named Yejide and Akin. They're both receiving a huge amount of pressure from their families to have a child, but they're finding it difficult to conceive. The families are so concerned and meddlesome that Akin's mother actually arranges for him to have a second wife. That all happens fairly early on in this novel, and it's difficult to talk about this book without spoilers, but roughly the novel traces their relationship from 1985 through about 20 or so years later. It's a really interesting story about how social and institutional forces force an otherwise happy relationship to break down. And in this way it actually reminded me of last year's Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction winner Lisa McNerney's The Glorious Heresies. This novel also interestingly shows big political changes happening in Nigeria in the background of the story. At the reading I went to, I asked Ayobami about this, and she said it was difficult for her to hold back on the politics because that's something she's really interested in, but she could only integrate it in sections where it really impacted on the lives of our characters. Overall, it's a really excellent novel with vibrant characters and unexpected twists. Next I read Space Man of Bohemia by Jaroslav Kalfar with these beautiful purple pages. So I've read how this novel has been compared to The Martian because it's a sort of Robinson Crusoe style adventure in space. It's so much better than The Martian. I mean, I enjoyed the experience of reading The Martian, but there was a lot about it that was grating to me. This novel is much more interesting because it gets very bizarre and surreal in some parts, like just bonkers. But then it's also contemplative and philosophical. Anyway, the story is about an astrophysicist named Jacob who becomes the first Czech man to travel into outer space when a comet causes a strange purple dust cloud to form near Venus. He's sent to investigate it and collect samples, so it's about his dramatic journey, but it's also about the story of his family in the Czech Republic. When the country was under communist rule, his father was a stooge for the government, who would inform on and torture anti-communists. So Jacob's journey is also about his reckoning with that complicated past. While it deals seriously with these issues, there's also a lot of great humor in the book and just absurd weirdness. It's a really enjoyable debut. The last two books that I read in the beginning of March, I've already talked about in a special video I made about the shortlist for the British Book Awards fiction category. You can watch that video by clicking on this link. I'm a judge on that prize, and both these excellent books are on that shortlist of 6 novels. So I'm only going to talk about these books briefly, and of course the Essex Serpent is a novel that I've been wanting to read for a really long time. And it's one of those books where I started to get worried because so many people I know really loved it, and so expectations were getting really high. But once I actually started it, I just really enjoyed it, and it's one of those stories that you just fall into. It's such a pleasurable reading experience. Perry's writing is so beautiful and atmospheric. It's just a joy. And with O'Farrell's novel, I have to admit, I was also quite nervous to start this because I'd seen O'Farrell read at a literary salon last September, and I have to say, I was sort of put off on reading this book because it sounded a bit superficial to me. It's about a famous actress who becomes a recluse, but it's actually more about her family. So I was really nervous starting it. I'm thinking, oh no, I have to read this novel for this prize, and what if I really hate it? But once I started reading it, I saw how wrong I was. She presents her characters in such a sympathetic and engaging way, and she also structures the novel in an interesting way to give a rounded look at a family. If you like Anne Tyler's novels, I'd particularly recommend this excellent book. So that's what I've been reading and doing lately, but let me know your thoughts on these novels or which of them you're really interested in reading. If you click show more, you'll see my full reviews of each of these books. So thanks for watching, and happy reading, everyone.